Hello? Okay. Yeah. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, welcome. We'll be starting in a few minutes, maybe about 3 minutes or so. Okay, if we can take our seats. You're all welcome to this event, Transboundary Water Cooperation to Restore and Sustain Water Ecosystems from Source to Sea. Your Excellencies, colleagues, partners, and friends, and our colleagues who have joined online, it is my honor to welcome you to this side event, Flow Forward, Transboundary Water Cooperation to Restore and Sustain Water Ecosystems from Source to Sea. I would like to begin by expressing my sincere appreciation to our co-hosts, the European Union, UNECE, Slovenia, and Finland, and to all our distinguished speakers joining us today. This year, 2026, marks a pivotal milestone for global water cooperation. For far too long, water has not received the political attention it urgently requires. Global water policy risks intensify, and the need for coordinated action becomes more pressing. Our purpose in convening this event is to bring together a broad community of stakeholders, governments, basin organizations, civil society, researchers, and practitioners to explore practical ways to strengthen effective water governance. Only through strong, inclusive cooperation can we restore, conserve, and sustainably manage our freshwater ecosystems, the rivers, the lakes, the wetlands, the aquifers, and the coastal zones that sustain both human well-being and the biodiversity upon which life depends. With more than 275 transboundary basins worldwide, cooperation is no longer optional, it's foundational. 40% of the world's population lives within river and lake basins shared by 2 or more countries. In today's world, sharing water fairly and sustainably demands innovation, diplomacy, and a willingness to transcend traditional approaches. Improved water diplomacy across all levels, national, local, and regional, is essential. Cooperation over shared waters is a cornerstone of international security, regional stability, and economic resilience. At the same time, water governance is profoundly local. Clean, reliable water underpins public health, food security, livelihoods, and opportunities for development. Where governance fails, the consequences are visible in rising poverty, declining biodiversity, degraded ecosystems, and too often conflict. For over 25 years, IUCN has been working to strengthen transboundary water cooperation through multi-level governance and nature-based solutions. One of our flagship programs, the Bridge Program, which is building river dialogue and governance, supports countries that share river basins to develop effective and inclusive water governance frameworks grounded in shared visions, benefit sharing principles, and trust. Bridge promotes cooperation among riparian states by supporting practical water diplomacy and by fostering learning about what works, what does not, and how we can do it better together. It is in this spirit of collective learning and shared commitment that we are gathered here today. I look forward to insights and experiences you'll bring and to the partnership that will continue to grow from this dialogue. Once again, welcome and thank you. It is now my pleasure to welcome Her Excellency Madame Rika Heikka, who is the permanent representative of Finland to UNEP. Welcome, Madam. Give your remarks.
Good afternoon. And many thanks, Luther, for paving the way So, Excellencies, I see at least the Ukrainian ambassador here, Yuri, distinguished colleagues, partners, and friends. It is a great honor for Finland to join this important dialogue on transboundary water cooperation and ecosystem restoration. I thank IUCN, the European Union, UNECE, and Slovenia for co-organizing this timely and impactful UNEA side event. Finland is pleased to be one of the state members, but also a framework partner to IUCN. We value IUCN's unique ability to bring together science, policy, and practice in a way that is inclusive, science-based, and globally connected. IUCN's long-standing expertise in nature-based solutions and transboundary water cooperation provides a strong foundation for advancing sustainable water governance. Dear participants, we are brought together by water, just to be very simplistic, which, as we all know, is essential to life. Water connects ecosystems, communities, and nations. Yet, as highlighted in the UNEP Executive Director's report earlier this year, water resources are under increasing pressure from climate change, pollution, and biodiversity loss. The stability of the global water cycle is a global concern that underpins the achievement of all sustainable development goals. It is crucial to acknowledge the role of aquatic ecosystems in climate and biodiversity actions. In this context, and given the global water crisis, the importance of a strategic approach to water resilience and security is underlined. This calls for the need for enhanced diplomacy. Responding to the global water crisis is the perfect example of a problem where all parts of our societies are needed. We all need to work together to take decisive action on water and make sure that different voices are heard and included into this joint effort, such as those of the indigenous people, women, youth, civil society, and that new innovations and services, including the ones of the private sector, are fully applied into practice. So, as Luther already also said, collective action is needed. Furthermore, effective and collaborative water management should be based on multidisciplinary science policy cooperation to ensure that decisions on shared water resources are guided by sound science, mutual trust, and a commitment to equity. Promotion of open scientific cooperation, data sharing, and data alignment is a cornerstone of international scientific and water cooperation. Dear friends, today the world is home to over 310 major transboundary water bodies, yet most still lack formal agreements between neighboring countries. This highlights the urgent need for structured and cooperative governance. Responding to global water crisis calls for transboundary and international water cooperation and related political commitments. The application of informed sustainable management and governance of water resources across sectors, and consequently, realization of the human rights to water and sanitation can only be achieved if countries work together. Finland is a proud supporter of the UNECE Water Convention, actually signed in 1992 in Helsinki, and of the UN 97 Water Courses Convention. These frameworks provide the legal backbone for peaceful, equitable, and sustainable transboundary water cooperation. When paired with trust building, these conventions pave the way not only for water security, but also for conflict prevention and regional stability. This is important. Valuable experience on transboundary water cooperation worldwide has been consolidated under the institutional structure of the UNECE Water Convention, to which we have been very happy to see many new countries acceding to, especially here in the African continent. The increasing number of accessions underlines the need for and importance of cooperation over shared water resources. Transboundary water cooperation is central to sustainable water management and governance to adequately and simultaneously respond to the diverse water-related development needs and the needs of the environment. Also, the two UN Water Conventions serve as a legal basis for management of transboundary effects of water pollution. They call for cooperation between freshwater and marine joint bodies to harmonize their work and to prevent, control, and reduce the transboundary impact. Last June, the guidance note on source-to-sea management in transboundary basins was launched at UN Oceans Conference in a side event that Finland organized together with UNECE, Slovenia, and other partners. So, dear participants, at the global level, we need to continue strengthening the dialogue on water within the UN at its core and ensure effective coordination and coherence of the UN's work on water. The UNEA Resolution 6/13, the UN System-Wide Strategy on Water and Sanitation, and the upcoming UN Water Conference in 2026 are examples of recent and ongoing efforts on the right direction. I'm eagerly looking forward to hearing our panelists deliberate on the questions of how transboundary water cooperation can contribute to restoring and sustaining water ecosystems from source to sea. These themes are difficult and complex, but at the same time, they are actionable. And they align directly with our joint commitment to SDG 6 and beyond. Strengthening water governance at all levels is a prerequisite for fulfilling the goals of the UN 2030 Agenda. I wish you a fruitful exchange and good discussions during the event. Asante sana.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency, for those remarks and for your commitment to water and also commitment to IUCN. At this point, it is my pleasure to invite Ms. Francisca Bernardini, who is the Chief Transboundary Cooperation Section UNCEE, who is going to give her remarks and actually give a keynote address. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Luther. And good afternoon, colleagues. I'm Francesca Bernardini. I'm the chief of the Transboundary Cooperation Section in the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe, which has the honor of hosting the Secretariat of the Water Convention, the UN Water Convention, or Helsinki Convention, as just mentioned by the ambassador. And first of all, I would like to thank IUCN, the EU, Slovenia, and Finland for organizing this event. And I've been invited to provide a keynote speech, but I think that Luther and the ambassador have already said a lot. And looking at the audience, I have the feeling that there are so many freshwater experts and so many ecosystem experts that I'm afraid I will bore you, but still, bear with me. There's a PowerPoint, which I don't see. Can somebody launch it, please? Thank you. We can go right into the next slide. So we heard Luther set very well the scene on the importance of transboundary river and lakes that are really the lifeblood of 52% of the world population. More than 2 billion people rely on them for drinking, food, fisheries, their livelihood. And it's assessed that overall the value of freshwater ecosystem at the global level is estimated to $50 trillion per year. This is for all freshwater ecosystem, but obviously, as I said, as transboundary one are more than a half, we can get a sense of how important these are. At the same time, we know the situation, unfortunately. There are huge challenges faced by this freshwater ecosystem. There's massive deterioration over the past decade with loss of ecological continuity. For instance, 2/3 of the major rivers in the world have been heavily altered. Climate change impact, drought, fires, also floods, salinity intrusion, pollution, eutrophication, and also biodiversity loss. For instance, we know that 24% of the freshwater species are at risk of extinction. And this is due to many reasons, but one of the reasons is also that freshwater services are often overlooked and undervalued. The kind of services that this ecosystem provide are difficult to monetize. We're talking, for instance, about sediment balance or biodiversity support. So there's no direct return on economic return, which makes it very difficult to understand their value. Obviously, there are other values which are very important, which are linked to food security, for instance, and so on and so forth. But there's a problem. Then there's, or as also mentioned before, a challenge of siloed approach, that conservation is seen as something that should be dealt by Ministry of Environment. It's not in the interest of Ministry of Agriculture, of Ministry of Energy, of Finance, and so on. So that's a big challenge that we have to tackle. And then also the reality that any investment on protection and conservation will take time to bear fruit. And therefore, this delayed impact of the action makes it difficult to politically commit on that. Then here we're to talk about the issue of transboundary ecosystem, and the transboundary dimension brings with itself very specific challenges, which are linked to the fact that to have a common impact, to have a common result, you need to have common vision across the border, and this is not always the case. We know that the majority of transboundary rivers and lakes do not have an agreement. We also know that in the one in which there is an agreement, ecosystem conservation is not always the main priority in the basin itself. Then there's also the fact that this complex institutional setting across border of multi-layer from the local to the national one, and also with the different sectoral approaches, makes it very complicated. So in the transboundary context, all the challenges that we are exacerbated by the governance dimension. However, we also know, and I don't have only bad news for you, we also know that we've seen progress, and that's something that was very interesting to witness at a recent workshop that we organized together with a number of partners, in which we saw a lot of solutions. And I would like to focus on the challenges and the solution in the rest of my presentation. So there are 5 messages which very much echo what was already said, and I would like to illustrate them also with specific examples. So next slide. The right one, yes. So the first one is use the tool we have. We need common rule to be able to protect this freshwater ecosystem, and these rules do not need to be reinvented. We have very strong international framework out there, in particular the Water Convention, which has very clear obligation and provision on ecosystem approach, ecosystem protection, conservation, and so on and so forth. So there are elements of law out there that can guide member states. And what is also very important, that the Water Convention doesn't only offer the text itself, but it offers a framework with a number of soft law tools, and it was already mentioned, for instance, the guidance note on the implementation of the source-to-sea management, which was mentioned before, but will also be illustrated later by Slovenia. But it's not only the Water Convention. There are other conventions which have very important obligations that can guide country effort. I'm thinking about the Ramsar Convention, I'm thinking about CBD, but I'm also thinking about the Climate Convention, and we've seen water progressively becoming more relevant in the water discourse. We have the global goal on adaptation, so it's fundamental to build on these synergies between instrument and to mainstream, for instance, in NDC and NAPS, water consideration and transboundary water consideration. So this is first message, and potential tool available. Second message that I would like to underline, and the importance of bringing it to the basin. And how you bring it to the basin is through specific basin organization. And this river basin organization, lake organization, need to be fit for handling this issue. They need to have in their mandate the responsibility for that, and they need to have the capacity to do that. And when they have so, it can bring incredible results. I mean, here I have the example, for instance, of the cooperation between France and Switzerland on Lake Geneva, where I live, and in a lake in which I swim and drink every day. And the lake was not in the quality I'm enjoying it now 30 years ago. There were huge problems of eutrophication, and only thanks to the coordinated efforts by Switzerland and France through the International Commission for the Protection of Lake Geneva, they were able to drastically reduce phosphorus concentration and phosphate concentration in the water, which had then improved biodiversity, the lake quality in general. And this is because it was a common vision and there was an institution which had this mandate very clearly and could coordinate action at the level of the two countries, but then also action at the level of the canton and the regional structure from both sides. So this is very important, and this varies significantly across the basin, the existing river basin in the world, that capacity. And as I was saying, in some river basin, there's no institution which can handle this kind of issue. So next slide. And also this was mentioned, the need to break the silos. Very often the driver of ecosystem deterioration and freshwater ecosystem deterioration are in very specific sector. And if we don't work with this sector, if we don't create incentive, it will be very difficult to promote conservation and protection. But at the same time, ecosystem conservation and restoration can bring such benefit for other sector that can be a door opener for cooperation. And here we have the very good example of the cooperation between, on the Itaipu River between Paraguay and Brazil, which is built around essentially hydropower development. Itaipu is the second biggest hydropower plant in the whole world. But the smart thing that the two countries did, they didn't focus only on energy generation. They focus on the multiple benefits that managing this hydropower plant and the reservoir can bring to drinking water, agriculture, fishery, and also tourism in general. And by adopting a whole watershed approach that protect the forest around the basin, around in the river and around the lake, they can control sediment and therefore produce more energy and more continuous energy. And at the same time, they can also have better quality in the reservoir, which makes the quality drinkable without a lot of efforts in in drinking water treatment. So this holistic approach that brings ecosystem conservation and protection together with other use is fundamental to go forward in this effort. Next slide. But obviously to do that, you need to understand how the ecosystem functions. You need to understand where you need to take action. You need to understand what is degraded and what are the drivers of degradation. And for that, you need to, across a basin, you need to understand it the same way on both sides, because as you know, one typical dynamic in transboundary cooperation is this assumption that something is happening on the other side, which is causing the problem. Or I am doing the effort and the other side is not doing. And therefore you need very strong capacity to exchange data and information to show what's happening across basin and to debunk all the myth about what's happening in your neighbor. And here again, it's fundamental the role of river basin organizations that need to have a strong mandate and also need to have capacity linked to data management and gather information from all the riparians that help countries to collectively take joint decisions. And a good example, a good realistic example is what's happening in the Niger Basin Authority, which the Niger Basin Authority. The Niger is one of the biggest rivers in West Africa, which gathers nine countries, and which has a very strong mandate for development for the country in the region, which are all at a low level of development and needs to develop their agriculture, develop their hydropower, and bring water to the population. And in this mandate, there's also a strong dimension on ecosystem conservation, which is recognized as an important element for livelihood. And countries in the Niger have agreed to share information on their data at the national level with the authority at the regional level, which allows to build this collective understanding. And in this data, there's also the ecosystem part. But the Niger is also a good example of the challenge that is faced in many basins, because in many respects, this data that is gathered and shared is often depending on specific projects. So there's no continuity. There's always the risk that when the project ends, information stop and action stop. And this leads me to my last message, which is the importance of financing. And this is, as we know, is the fuel of every action in any area, and in particular in the transboundary context is particularly important because, again, it requires collective action across all country in the basin, and which is very more difficult to generate than at the national level. And that's why financing is such an important domain of transboundary water cooperation, which is under political attention at the moment. And obviously, the core resource for transboundary cooperation needs to come at the national level, but this is not enough. And that's why, for instance, the Itaipu example of having revenue-generating activity from transboundary cooperation financing other is one good example. But we also have more and more innovative financing examples of river basin organizations which are trying to tap on different sources of finance, private finance, but also charities or in general the private sector, and the CORB, which is a fund established in the Okavango River Basin, is a novel example that shows different approaches that can be used also for ecosystem conservation and protection that needs to be replicated in other basins. And so this leads to my conclusion. As it was said already since the onset, transboundary cooperation is necessary for enhancing ecological outcome and support better management of both blue water and green water. And at the same time, sustainably managing and restoring freshwater ecosystem can be an entry door, an opening for starting cooperation between riparian countries. And obviously, the solution that I showed are not the only one, but there's a huge need to scale up these positive approaches. And there's a need to build capacity, to strengthen the business case for protection and conservation and for cooperation, and also for making sure that this is something which is at the core mandate of river basin organization and lake basin organization, and it's not a side issue. And also we need methodology, we need data, we need tools for the assessment, but also the financing, and we need to break down the silo. And with that, I'd like to conclude, and thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Francisca, for those strong keynote points that you have brought. At this point, I just want to welcome Sophie Jaffe, who is the permanent observer of IUCN to the UN, to lead a panel discussion. Welcome, Sophie.
Hopefully this one works now. Good afternoon, everybody, and I'm glad to see this room completely packed. For those standing outside, do try and find a seat inside too. Hopefully it doesn't get too hot, but we do have that lovely breeze from outside. I'm really, really honored to be joined by an expert all-female panel this afternoon, and I'm looking forward to a really dynamic discussion hearing about best practices on transboundary water cooperation. And after the panel discussion, we will have space for a short Q&A, so if you do have a question in mind, keep that noted down and raise your hands when we come to that. We're hoping to make this truly interactive, given that we are outside of the basement meeting rooms in New York and actually enjoying this beautiful scenery here as well. So first, can I welcome up Ms. Cristina de Avila, Head of Unit of the Global Environmental Cooperation and Multilateralism Unit of the European Commission's Environment Directorate General, where she leads the unit's work on several multilateral agreements. Welcome, Cristina. And next, could I please welcome up Dr. Farhina Ahmed, who is Secretary for the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change in the Government of the People's Republic of Bangladesh. Thank you so much for joining us here today. I'm very, very glad to have with us here today a remarkable woman. It's Miss Monica Gitau. She's the director for the Water for Life Alliance Kenya, and she has been working passionately on environmental adaptations to climate change, including within her teaching career. Thank you, Monica. And last, but certainly not least, Ms. Tina, who is counselor in the permanent representation of Slovenia to the UN in Geneva, where she focuses on the triple planetary crisis and leads work on transboundary water management and nexus approaches, such as the Water, Peace and Security Nexus. Thank you, Tina. So first of all, let me turn to you, Ms. Christina. Looking forward to the 2026 Water Conference and beyond that to the post-2030 SDG context, what concrete environmental, social, economic and political commitments are needed from that conference next December to enhance transboundary water cooperation in a post-SDG world?
Hello, good afternoon, and thank you very much for inviting me to be here in this panel. So going to your question on what concretely is needed from the 2026 Water Conference, we think that the 2026 United Nations Water Conference must move beyond general declarations to show our collective ambition to action and demand concrete binding commitments to accelerate progress in this post-SDG 6 environment. Progress on transboundary cooperation in SDG 6.5.2 remains dangerously low and needs to receive increased focus. The EU's goal is to work with all partners towards an action-oriented outcome of the conference with concrete and tangible results to accelerate implementation of SDG 6. Strengthening global water governance and engaging in discussions on a future global water governance framework. The conference needs to establish a clear intergovernmental process on water under the UN post-2030, ensuring water resilience remains a permanent feature on the global agenda and supported by a dedicated UN Special Envoy. We need a bold vision for water resilience globally, and we need to explore new opportunities. That means a greater collaboration between businesses, researchers, policymakers, to create a competitive and resilient sector that can address current and future challenges. The UN system-wide strategy on water and its implementation plan must be at the core of the UN system's water action, underpinned by sufficient resources. This will ensure moving from a fragmented water governance at the global level to a more coherent one. The EU will push for the accelerated rollout and implementation of the UN Water Convention and the Water Courses Convention as essential tools for hydrodiplomacy and conflict prevention. The core political outcome must include a mandate to mainstream water security directly into all UN mandates on climate, biodiversity, droughts, peace and security, creating a common platform for shared decision-making rather than unilateral actions. At the same time, we need to unlock new financing solutions. And the EU has already allocated substantial funding for transboundary water management in Africa, and we will continue working with partners to ensure that we move from a project-by-project funding model to a basin-scale investment framework that ensures cost recovery for water services, while safeguarding affordability and access for the most vulnerable. So commitments must mandate inclusive governance with the inclusion of non-state actors, especially women, youth, and indigenous peoples, and all stages of transboundary river basin management plan development. The broader environmental agenda, including but not limited to water, ocean, chemicals, pollution, biodiversity, and climate change, need to be kept high on the agenda in the context of the UN at 18. So that's how we are seeing it from the European Union side.
Thank you very much, Christina. And really good to hear about EU's ambitious expectations from that 26th conference. And we're certainly all counting on the EU to keep pushing for a real transform change in the global water agenda. You mentioned as well the substantial work that the EU is doing to support other countries to develop their frameworks for transboundary water cooperation. So to follow up on that question, could I ask you to elaborate a little bit more on how the EU is drawing on its own experience in transboundary water cooperation to support, strengthen national transboundary, regional and global cooperation elsewhere?
So thank you very much for that question. Currently in the European Union, the European Water Resilience Strategy, which was adopted in June this year, is our roadmap to a sustainable water future and will be our flagship for the UN26 UN Water Conference. As the water crisis is a global problem that needs global cooperation and global solutions. So our strategy includes a strong international dimension, outlining how the EU will support water infrastructure worldwide, champion integrated water resources management, advance water diplomacy and transboundary water management, better mainstream water into the global agendas on climate change, biodiversity and desertification, build strategic partnerships and contribute to closing the financial gap in the sector. But the EU's strategy has been built upon the EU's comprehensive water regulation and in particular the Water Framework Directive, which explicitly requires transboundary water cooperation in river basins. It is well proven, both within Europe and also globally, that transboundary cooperation delivers better knowledge and understanding, more cost-effective joint plans and programs, and improved water management. Transboundary water cooperation can help parties address the root causes of the water-related conflicts and develop solutions acceptable to all. They also create more social and economic benefits from water that would be available if countries manage this precious resource unilaterally. So the global experience shows that transboundary water cooperation increases the type and size of benefits that countries can obtain from sustainable water management. And maybe let me briefly outline, as you were asking the question, on our experience during the many years, the 25 years of implementation of our internal EU legislation. So we saw that the core success lies in the directive's legal requirement for member states to coordinate their actions with international river basin districts, elevating this cooperation from a voluntary option to a non-negotiable duty, significantly strengthened all transboundary waters and the major river basin authorities, like the Danube and the Rhine commissions. The directive also provides a single common goal, which is called the good status of the water, and a shared planning cycle, the river basin management plans. And this has enforced joint monitoring, transparent data exchange, and harmonized measures to tackle transboundary pollution sources collectively. Despite the strong legal frameworks, the Water Framework Directive biggest hurdle is the implementation gap. And I don't think we will be alone in the European Union finding that implementation for the policy goals that we set ourselves or obligations tends to be the problem at the end and the biggest obstacle. So we've seen that cooperation lags behind due to the lack of sustained, dedicated funding and the difficulty in addressing diffuse pollution, leading to missed deadlines across the continent. So achieving the good status is often also hindered by competing economic sectors. So restoring river continuity and reducing hydrological pressure is often seen as working against sectoral interests, requiring difficult political trade-offs that transcend the national boundaries. And while countries must cooperate, the legal obligation to achieve good status rests individually in the individual member states. So there is an ongoing challenge in creating mechanisms that will ensure that transboundary accountability when one country's actions affect the other. So just to conclude, we have come a long way in the EU, but much more still needs to be done, both in EU and globally, to tackle all these challenges of transboundary water cooperation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Christina. Moving now to Dr. Farhina Ahmed from the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change of Bangladesh. Yes, sorry. Dr. Ahmed, could you speak a little bit to the issue that Christina mentioned about competing sectoral interests and more precisely how green and blue water considerations can be integrated into national, transboundary, regional and global cooperation arrangements and mechanisms?
First of all, I would like to thank and congratulate IUCN, UNEP and all partners to organize this very important dialogue at UNEP 7. A country like Bangladesh, my answer will be little elaborate to succinct my position, my articulation. Bangladesh is a country situated in the South Asia region, in a very low-lying delta. Upstream, there is a Himalaya, and the downstream, we are attached to the Bay of Bengal. So this is the geographical situation. And we had almost thousands of rivers. Country is a rivers, almost 300 is dead within 50 years of time. So, and 93% of our rivers originated from the Himalayan region, the Ganges, and we share the transboundary water resources. And also, more than 90% of our water use depends on those rivers for renewables, for livelihood, for industrialization, for everything. So this is the situation currently we are facing, and 25% of our population face flood and water inundation each and every year, and most of the time, and especially in monsoon, they live underwater. But at the same time, during dry season, we face desertification and lack of water. And in addition, due to the sea level rise, 25% of our coastal areas facing the salinity intrusion. So it is in total the severe condition of water crisis. So and how we are surviving with 175 million population in a very small country with that basic problems. So I believe that Bangladesh is a resilient nation, and we believe that international instruments, Bangladesh recently joined in the Water Convention, and also the state party of UNCCD, UNFCCC, UNCBD. All the instruments and international supports like J-Fund, GCF, and other funds, bilateral, also from MDBs. So we are working to build our resilience in the context of climate change and the water crisis. And we believe we have many success stories in the project. And in our NDCs, National Adaptation Plan, and SDG implementation pathways, we have integrated all our problems, issues, and have our strategic direction how to overcome. We have developed our long-term plan, Delta Plan 2100. So we have a very good strategic planning. And we also have joint Transboundary River Commission with our neighboring countries. Using Transboundary River Basin Organization to harmonize green and blue water management is an area for focusing regionally and internationally, would be a great way to deal with these kinds of challenges. For shared basins like the Ganga, Brahmaputra, Meghna, cooperation platform including joint river commissions, basin commissions, and joint monitoring mechanism should expand their mandates to include soil moisture, because the commissions, they only talk about, and the TOR is about the blue water ways and things like that. So their mandates should be broadened and deepening to address soil moisture, evapotranspiration, groundwater recharge, ecological flows, and not only surface water allocation. This will enable joint drought flood management and more resilient agriculture system. And another point we would like to emphasize on advancing regional science policy platform for green-blue water data sharing, that South Asia, Southeast Asia, and other regions need common frameworks for hydroclimate data exchange, satellite-based water accounting, groundwater information system, and early warning services. UNEP led or UN water technical platforms can help in harmonizing standards and support decision-making on water scarcity, land degradation, and food security. And strengthening global environmental agreements through water ecosystem linkages should be established. UNEP CCC, CCD, CBD, and Ramsar commitments can be aligned through a green-blue water nexus approach, integrating soil moisture conservation, wetland protection, river restoration, and sustainable groundwater use across these conventions would support coherent reporting and unlock multi-benefit climate biodiversity financing. And a few more points I have, if you allow. Embedding natural-based solutions and landscape approaches into cooperation arrangement should be in place. Ecosystem-based adaptation, wetland restoration, and upstream, downstream benefit sharing, and watershed scale NBS can serve as common principles across national and transboundary agreements. Countries can adopt shared guidelines and environmental flows, riparian buffers, and nature-positive agriculture to enhance resilience and reduce climate and disaster risk. And mobilizing joint investment and financing mechanism for this work for water security also needed. And I think Regional Development Bank, GCF, and multi-country climate programs can support co-finance green-blue water initiatives such as Transboundary, fire management, floodplain restoration, and so on. And recently, I'm a council member of Climate Investment Fund. So few months back, the CIF approved one project, regional water management project, African country led by Zimbabwe, 7 countries. So actually, river and nature doesn't maintain the boundaries and borders and doesn't need passports and visas. So we need to adopt that lens to deal the nature and to meet up the challenges. And finally, championing our case, our leadership in the deltaic climate resilient cooperation can be one way of looking at the challenges, and our experiences can be shared, can be scaled up. I think how we are surviving. There are a lot of small and I would say women-led initiatives are there, small scales and success stories that can be scaled up and shared with other countries. And Bangladesh regionally contributes to BIMSTEC, SARC, WMA forecasting platform, sharing data on river flows, sediments, and soil saturation on strengthen collective resilience. Our experience with tidal rivers management is now informing broader regional dialogues on nature-based solution, delta solutions. So globally, Bangladesh is a champion in managing those challenges. So we can be the experimental space and can be useful for others to learn and replicate. So ecosystem management through UNEP, CCC, UNCCD, CBD, Ramsar, and works with different financial bodies and scales projects that link aquifer recharge, wetland restoration, and climate adaptation can be beneficial for Bangladesh and regional and other countries, those have similar challenges. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Ahmed. And I think you answered already my follow-up question, which was about what best practices from Bangladesh you could share. We heard many very good practices, and really wonderful to also hear, you mentioning that Bangladesh can be this kind of experimental ground where good practices can be developed that can then be replicated elsewhere. Good point that you made about the integration of the green water considerations into the 3 Rio Conventions and other MEAs. And hopefully this is something that we will hear more about during the MEA's day on Wednesday here. So moving onward in my panel, I will ask the 2 remaining panelists to be brief because we're running short on time. Monica Gitau is the director for the Water for Life Alliance in Kenya. My first question to you would be, how can local information and traditional indigenous knowledge be integrated into policy formulation of water resource management?
Good afternoon, all. Thank you, Sophie, for this opportunity to share the local knowledge, traditional indigenous knowledge being embedded into water resource management or transboundary waters. So we have rich local information and traditional knowledge on water resource management. By integrating this information and traditional knowledge to policies and water resource management systems, there will be strengthened sustainability, legitimacy, and long-term resilience. Examples of this local transformation and traditional indigenous knowledge to the policies and water cyclic climate and hydrological patterns based on oral stories, experience, and expertise. So local people understand area climate, weather, and season from previous experience. So their input is very, very important. This can really help in guiding the formation of policies, since they will have an idea of what is to happen and what is to be expected. Thus, advice, guidance, and cautions to the citizen. We also have indigenous ecological indicators. There is local knowledge, indigenous traditional knowledge on plants blooming, animal migration, reproduction, adjustment, and body or physiological adaptations. So this is rich information that can be gotten from local people, from local communities. We also have what we call cultural norms and, that promote water. Remember, in most communities, we believe that water is life. So there are those community norms that guide in the usage management, sharing of water as a gem to the community. So we have got traditional indigenous heritage that include taboos and customary laws, do's and don't on these communities that are very important in transboundary waters. So, as my colleague said, that this transboundary water sharing and usage does not need visas, do not need passports, and so every community can use water. There is what we call collective community management practices on water resource. So we find that most communities have got their put or set up management of this gem, water resource, which most of the times comes naturally. It is a God-given, it is a resource that is supposed to be accessed by all members of the community. And so there are those put guidelines on how to manage it, how to use it, and how to share it. So we have got, in most of the times, we have spiritual and cultural values on this water, both green and blue waters. And so with this, this local knowledge, this local traditional indigenous heritage is very, very important on water policies, on water management systems. So we have got what we call, these communities actually, they are aware, they know, they are knowledgeable on detecting changes in water quality and quantity. Community moves swiftly towards solving the challenges than the formal systems. We find that, for example, a water-based community is able to move swiftly or to move rapidly, to respond rapidly to water challenges more than even the government. So it's very important for us to include them in this water resource management. So how local information and traditional indigenous knowledge help us to enhance this? How do they enhance this? So water resilience is the ability of communities and ecosystems to withstand, adjust to, adapt to, and recover from water-related stresses, such as droughts, floods, pollution, and climate change effects and impacts. So what are these? Accurate knowledge of seasonal water flow, groundwater behavior, and water shade patterns. So that is local knowledge and traditional indigenous heritage. So we also have got insight into early signs of eventualities, such as calamities, misfortunes like drought, floods, mudslides or landslides, siltation, and receding riverbanks. So from local communities, you get information, indicators on this, some cautious signs that there'll be some calamities, etc. So very important. Let us not ignore local knowledge. Let us not ignore traditional indigenous people plus their heritage. So we have got informed traditional indigenous observations of happenings, phenomena, occurrences. That one I've said, I've talked about it. And we have got what we call wetland protections, which buffers floods and purifies water. So we have got local information on how to deal with floods, how to purify this water, even after a heavy rain, after a heavy siltation of water. These people, they know how to go about it, about purifying this water so that they can reuse, they can use in the household, with the livestock, and also with their agriculture. So they know how to actually protect the wetland. They do it, they plant those crops, those plants that can hold that wetland, that water inside the soil, that water inside those plants. They do know it. Let us not ignore them. So we have got sacred natural sites. So with this local knowledge, traditional indigenous people, I believe each and every community has got what we call natural sites, divine, sacred, that they are there. The rivers, the springs, the oceans, the part of sea, the part of lake that these people hold dear, and they are there to protect. They are there to manage these sacred, divine, natural sites of water. Things like physical features like forest, grassland management, which stabilizes soils and regulates hydrology, is very important to these people, and they actually know how to manage it. So I'm calling upon all to embrace this local knowledge, the traditional indigenous knowledge on water resource management and policy formulation. So we've got attested traditional and indigenous methods of catchment protection, of groundwater, recharge, floods, silting, flash mitigations that are way predated. Yet, be it modern ways of mitigations. Yes, biodiversity conservations, they are there. Biodiversity, may it be floral or may it be fauna. These local people, these traditional indigenous people, they are knowledgeable on how to conserve this biodiversity. And so let us embrace them. Let us put them on board every time we are having formulation of water policies. So local information and traditional knowledge, yes, it's there. We have seen, I've just talked about it. So allow me to talk about the policies, how policies should be incorporated in this insight. I'll be very brief. So making traditional, indigenous, and local knowledge information part of the baseline environmental assessment and formulation. So combining traditional, indigenous, and local knowledge with modern skills like GIS and hydrological models. For example, identifying and mapping traditional flooding zone, mudslides, prone areas. And the third one, and the last one, we've got including traditional indigenous experts, specialists, and knowledgeable people in the initial policy formulation process. As this will provide a collaborative and consultative working, hence excellent policies and guidelines of water resource management. Let us all embrace local information and traditional indigenous knowledge in water policy formulation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Monica, for raising this very important issue. And it is remarkable that in this region of the world, you have communities who have lived for centuries in incredibly water-scarce regions, long before there existed any modern services or forecasting services. So we have a lot to learn from those people who are used to living with water scarcity. And Monica raised some very concrete recommendations in her remarks about how we can do that. So last but not least, and Tina, I will ask you to be brief, so we have time for that Q&A. Tina, we heard today in Ambassador Heika's remark about the new guidance note for the implementation of source-to-sea management in transboundary basins. As current chair of the Bureau of the Water Convention, can you share a little bit more about that guidance note and what does it offer and how can people in this audience benefit from it? Thank you.
Thank you very much for this question. Indeed, as you mentioned, Slovenia is currently chairing the Water Convention Bureau, and we are very happy to co-sponsor and be part of this side event. This guidance note was developed under the leadership of Estonia, Panama, and Slovenia, and of course under the framework of the Water Convention work. And since we are a bit running out of time, my now goal will be to maybe try to convince you that you have a look at this guidance note when we finish this event. So what it actually is, it's both a call to action, but it's also a very practical tool that all of you can use. And as such, it provides a very clear roadmap how to apply source-to-sea management approach. And I will just quite quickly go through the actual content of this guidance note. Again, maybe it sparks your interest to have a look at it after this side event. So firstly, this guidance note, it explains very detailed but comprehensive way what actually source-to-sea management is and why should we use it, how we can benefit from it. It explains why this is defined as integrated as well as a holistic approach. It also includes, for example, explanation, and it shows how this approach actually contributes to addressing climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution. Then this guidance note also puts the source-to-sea into the context of transboundary cooperation. We heard a lot about it. It's also the main topic of this event. So it really explains how to include this approach in already existing transboundary water cooperation, or if there is intention or process to establish new transboundary water cooperation. It then also makes a link with existing global legal frameworks and regional governance frameworks. And this part then, the next one, becomes the most practical part of the guidance note. It's actually a 6 steps approach to implementation of this approach. And last but not least, it actually also gives some recommendations how to then accelerate the implementation of this approach. And if maybe by now you're still not convinced why to use the guidance note, or you're not even convinced why to use this approach, I can just very briefly tell you that it does contribute to strengthening our resilience to global challenges. It contributes to healthier ecosystems. It contributes to optimizing the use of resources. And also, we should not forget that it does contribute to peace and security. Was that brief? Brief and
Fantastic. So amazing. I think our panel wrapped up on time, which gives us about 20 minutes for a Q&A from the audience, so get ready. I do have some speakers who were so eager to speak that they've already indicated. So I believe we have with us in the audience the State Secretary for the Environment of Hungary. Yes, please, you have the floor. So my colleague Tommy here is handing over a microphone, so just raise your hand if you want the microphone and he will give it to you. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for this introduction. It was exemplary, so thank you very much for the opportunity. I have to confirm that we are a very committed member of UNEP, and we very much appreciate the work that UNEP is doing in actually all the environmental fields, but particularly in the Water Convention, and also the Water and Health Protocol. I do think that it is also an example for a great cooperation between UN bodies and intersectoral cooperation. So that's why we have to focus on that. And Slovenia is chairing now the Water Convention. Hungary just finished chairing the Water and Health Protocol. We just had the 7th MOP in Budapest a few weeks ago. And there we had the opportunity to discuss with the Executive Secretary of the UNEP about several issues, among others, the good practices that we can share. And one of them, I have to mention to you, is the national implementation. So it's good that we have international agreements, but how we implement them is the key. And there we also focus on intersectoral cooperation, and well, we have a working group, an expert group, which tries to ease it. And as we've seen in the slides and we've heard in the speeches how many international water courses we have in the world and how many international aquifers. We are there, so we are one of them. We share 95% of our surface waters and 96% of our aquifers. So we're more than obliged to cooperate with our neighbors. So we have international transboundary water commissions with each and every one of them, which is working. And we also the Danube was already mentioned as the most international catchment area of the world. There too, I can tell you one good example. I don't know if Europeans know, but maybe outside from Europe it's not very obvious that last year we had very big floods. Last autumn was very severe, and there too we have a CBDR which is actually cooperating very regularly. And when the floods came beforehand, we had a very widespread meteorological and disaster management authorities cooperation throughout the Danube River Basin. So this way we could at least a little bit find it easier to manage all the floods that were coming. That was very extreme. And last but not least, because you also mentioned the source to sea at the very end, we do believe in this principle. I'm very glad that it also became part of the plastics treaty at current state. I know it's a little pending. Let's put it that way. But in that sense and in that spirit, I would like to draw your attention to one initiative that we are supporting. It's a civil society initiative. It's called the PET Cup, meaning that civilians, people come together for 13 years now, and in our international river, the Tisa, which is actually coming from Ukraine, Slovakia, and so on, they collect the plastic bottles, and they more than 50% recycle it. And it's a competition. It's a great job, and it is also in order to clean the rivers before they get to the oceans and the seas, because if they clear them at the beginning, then there won't be problems, or less problems are going to be at the very end. And it was also exported to 6 other countries who were interested in this idea. So I think that when we share good practices, when we share the good initiatives, when we pay attention to each other, when we discuss these issues, that can bring us closer to the solution. So I thank you very much for this panel discussion, for the speeches beforehand, and for the opportunity to talk with you today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and so glad to have you here with us today. For the next speaker, I have Joachim Harlin from UNEP. Could I please also ask you to not just make a statement, but also ask a question, so we make the best use of our distinguished panelists here.
Thank you. So I will definitely ask a question. But first, let me just announce that the Danes have launched a project here in this region. It's called Climate Resilience Transboundary Water Management for Eastern Africa. CREATES. It's a project with IUCN and with UNEP. It's a $45 million project over 5 years, and it's part of this Team Europe initiative, and it's focusing on the Sio Malabar Malakisi River Basin between Uganda and Kenya, and also the Mara River Basin between Kenya and Tanzania. So this was announced at the UN 2023 Water Conference. I'm very happy that this is now taking off. So within that project, there's going to be a strong focus on implementing nature-based solutions. So my question is around that. And one could, of course, consider the whole river basin as a nature-based solution itself. And maybe that's something to reflect upon. But I'd like to ask the panelists, because there was, from Bangladesh, for example, you mentioned the need for joint investments, the need for multi-country climate projects. How can we use nature-based solutions for improved transboundary water management? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joachim. Is this working? Yep. I'll gather all the questions and then I'll turn them over to panelists. But if the panelists can take note of anything was specifically directed to you, and that way you can also prepare a little bit. Next, I have Stefania Minestrini from the Water for All Partnership. Can you raise your hand? Yes.
Good afternoon, and thank you very much for giving me the floor. My name is Stefania Minestrini from the Italian Institute for Environmental Protection and Research, which is based in Rome, in Italy. And in this couple of minutes, I would like to raise your attention on a global partnership, which is named Water for All, Water Security for the Planet. And this is a partnership with more than 90 members from Europe, Africa, South America, and the Middle East, aiming at scientific research and innovation on fresh water, with the overall objective to provide a significant contribution to the achievement of SDG 6. The partnership has a mission to deliver methodologies, knowledge, and tools to support water management and planning, but also to enhance the participation of citizens, because we know that the citizen science is very, very important, and we heard from Wallaf what is important about the participation of people, local people. The first key message I would like to deliver today is that any kind of action to strengthening water policy needs to be a knowledge-based decision. Knowledge, for instance, on availability of water in terms of space and time is essential to provide well-informed science decisions. And for instance, we have the water stress indicators, SDGs 6.4.2, and these indicators is also based on knowledge of availability of water in terms of space and time. This is a very valuable side event because it's actually addressing one of the two most challenging issues for the implementation of SDG 6, which is actually the implementation of the transboundary water management. And of course, the other main challenge is the access to quality water for all. And strengthening international cooperation is indeed one of the core themes identified by this partnership, which represents also an opportunity for the development of a strategic research and innovation agenda. Recently, this Water for All partnership has developed a position paper to support the European water resilience strategies. We heard from the European Commission that has been published last June. And to this regard, the partners are also thinking to produce a publication to map the state of the art of strategic goals, such as, for instance, restoring and protecting the water cycle, to identify the knowledge gaps, but also the knowledge needs, research needs, together with living labs focused on water cycle. But also, we think that the implementation of UNEA 6 resolution on inclusive solutions to strengthening water policies could be a good opportunity, because we also need to look from the past, what we have achieved and implemented. So, and this partnership could be also an opportunity to enhance cooperation and research in this field. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Stefania. And last on my list of people who wanted to take the floor, and then I'll open it up wider, is Anna Sellis. She's right in the back, Tommy. Anna is representing the German Speleological Federation.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for the floor. So I represent the German Speleological Federation, which is a karst specialized organization from civil society. And we are the members of the NGO major group and focal point for the resolution on karst ecosystems that it's being negotiated since last week here at UNEA. So this resolution is being discussed, and it emphasized that managing water requires a wider perspective, from the source to the sea, but also far beyond to include groundwater. In karst landscapes, surface water is scarce, so groundwater is the lifeline. And what we are bringing into the topic as NGO focusing karst specialized ecosystems is the fact that these ecosystems, what we know about them, has come from civil society, but also we are advocating for the recognition in the resolution of indigenous peoples' knowledge and traditions. And what we are seeing is that the perspective that is being discussed is basically not aware of this. And this is really a point of worry for us, because it has been almost 130 years since speleology, the study of caves and karst, started. So we believe that what we consider a historical resolution at UNEA must address the importance of how this started and the importance of what is the significance, like the deeper significance of karst environments as ecosystems. It is also true that in terms of transboundary aquifers, the karstic ones are the least recognized. Despite karst supply water for 10% of the global population, only 6.9 subterranean ecosystems worldwide are currently protected under international frameworks such as the World Heritage Sites Program, UNESCO Global Geoparks, Cave Map Networks, the Ramsar Convention on Wetlands. So the message in this intervention is to member states, and the participants of this side event consider supporting this resolution in terms of the recognition of the vital role that indigenous peoples' knowledge and also speleology as karst specialized civil society organizations play in advancing exploration, surveying, mapping, and understanding of global transboundary karst aquifers. My concrete question is, what do you think is needed to elevate the visibility of transnational waters, not only karst, but global waters that are not seen by most of the people? This is our main concern. How can we play a role as civil society, as indigenous peoples, as governments, to make these water sources more visible? Because this is one of the main focus of what speleologists have been doing, in more than 130 years, trying to make them visible for the people from the perspective of their beauty, but from the perspective of the biology, the perspective of water sources, of the archaeology, paleontology. We have been working, so we really believe that there must be a recognition inside of this resolution that it's historical, it's important, it sets a precedent for what can come next. And we are bringing this message, including indigenous peoples, because this is two components really important. And I don't want to, and we don't want to put aside science, but the knowledge of karst and caves started, obviously, with indigenous peoples and their communities, and with the speleologists, which is included as civil society organizations. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anna. I'm going to open up the floor now for one more question, and then I'll turn it back to the panel. Yes, I see a young gentleman here in the front. On the left, Tommy over here. Sorry. Thank you. And please be quick. One quick question.
Okay. Thank you, Sophie and your panelists. Now I'll have to congratulate you for the well work you've done there. I see the women-led panelists and solving the world how do I say it? You are finding solutions to the world SDG problem. Thank you for that. Now there's something that I can take back there home. My one and only question that I had, or rather a concern that I've noted, how do you plan, or how do you all plan to engage the youth in SDG realization? What's your intention from the fine panelists, the right to the left? How do you intend from your countries? How do you intend to do all that? Because there's so much that you can realize with less energy from you, but with more input from the youth. What's your plan for the youth in involvement in SDG realization by 2030? Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was a really good question. I will ask all panelists to chip in on how to engage youth. But perhaps first, if I could direct the question on financing for nature-based solutions to Dr. Ahmed, because it was addressed to you. If you could be brief.
Thank you. I think it is very much possible because regional projects on watershed management or river basin management, engaging civil society, NGOs from both countries' end, they actually interact regularly. So it's not a problem, and we had discussion during climate COP and others that actually countries, neighboring countries, regional people, they actually want that. So if the arrangement is there, it is possible. Also, the mangrove plantation across the coastal belt, that also can be a good part of nature-based solution to give multiple, not only biodiversity and water restoration, also to address the climate change and mitigation, both mitigation and adaptation. And it is absolutely important to prevent the Hindu Kush, the Himalayan, the source of drinking water. It is melting now. So if it ends, it will be a disaster. So it is high time to act. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ahmed. And we do have a resolution as well on glaciers and the cryosphere, and this is so important to protect those systems. Tina, would you like to grab the question on elevating the visibility of transboundary groundwater systems?
Thank you very much for the question, and Anna, thank you very much for actually raising the attention also to groundwaters. I think that's a very important one because it's very often overlooked, or we don't think about it, while many of us actually rely on groundwaters when it comes to drinking water. When it comes to visibility, I quickly looked through what Slovenia is also doing and what other countries are doing. We use, for example, water diplomacy activities in New York, Geneva, Nairobi, wherever possible, to raise the attention to water, to transboundary water, but also, for example, on nexuses like water, peace, and security. Then we use Water Convention. It's a great tool. There is a great cooperation. There is great access and a lot of opportunities to, again, promote the visibility of this matter. We also have high hopes about the UN Water Convention next year, so we hope that, yeah, it's going to contribute to increasing the visibility, and not just that, but actually put this cooperation on a next level and something that we can work with for the years to come. And what I would also ask, because we don't work in, we don't work in isolation, so also in the guidance note that I was presenting earlier, we listed several really key stakeholders that we think should be included in promoting, implementing, applying this approach, and I see all these actors as the relevant ones to contribute to the visibility. And I actually put out the list that I'm going to mention who are those stakeholders, just to make sure that we put also visibility on those stakeholders. So we have governments, international organizations, NGOs, financial institutions, private sector, academia, and research institutions that you also mentioned, and then regional and basin organizations. And here, within all these groups, we also see a strong inclusion of women, youth, and indigenous peoples, among others. And just because we also had a question on youth participation, there are examples of including young people, for example, in river commissions. We also have one example in Slovenia, Sava River Commission. We also have a youth river commission. It's a great mechanism to include young people, so we would promote such participatory mechanisms to include young people. And I will use this because maybe it's my last word to say on this side event. Before we heard from our colleague panelist that Transboundary does not have a passport. It doesn't require a passport. And I would build on that and say, but it does need a cooperation. It needs a very strong cooperation. And I hope that we also, after this event, that we create very strong partnerships.
Thank you very much, Tina. And perhaps if I can just ask one of the panelists to chip in on the youth. Christina, do you want to take that one? How do we engage youth effectively in 30 seconds? And then I'm going to thank the panelists for today.
Thank you very much for the questions. For the question on the youth in particular. So we have seen that there are several ways of integrating the youth. Several conventions have youth networks. We have proven to be very efficient in creating international connections between youth that are working in government, but also in other organizations. So these tend to be quite powerful tools. But I think at the end, here we are talking about transboundary cooperation. At the end, everything passes through national. So if we want, at the end of the day, to have the voice of the youth heard, the voice of the indigenous people heard, the voice of people in difficult circumstances heard. They all need to be heard through their governments, and their governments need to have a representative voice, be a representative voice of all these groups as well. So we need to strengthen also the governance and the representation at national level. So they are tools to enhance involvement at international level, like these networks that I've explained, but also it's important to continue working with representation at national level, because at the end of the day, they are the governments that are going to be finding the agreements amongst themselves. So I think both need to come in parallel. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Christine. And can I ask you all to give a big round of applause to the panelists here today? Thank you so much. If I can also ask you to remain seated just for a few more minutes so we can do this as smoothly as possible. Could I invite up Mr. Lionel Favre? He's head of the Department for Environment and Climate, Directorate for Global Affairs at the French Ministry of Europe and Foreign Affairs, for some concluding remarks.
Can you hear me? Yes. Excellencies, distinguished guests, colleagues, It is an honor to be invited to close this session today after such rich remarks and interventions. Thank you to these wonderful panelists for sharing their insights and ideas, and congratulations, Federica, for the amazing keynote. The discussion has left of always a lot of food for thought. I'm not going to try to summarize everything that was discussed today, but I will stress a few things that are critical for France when we talk about the future of global water governance and transboundary water cooperation. Water is the cornerstone of sustainable development. It is also at the center of climate crisis. With climate change causing growing variability in the global water cycle, we are seeing unprecedented drought, heavy rains, and floods of increased frequency and intensity all over the world. At the same time, the challenges are exacerbated by inadequate management and unsustainable use of water resources and related challenges of biodiversity loss and pollution. We need to respond with greater political visibility and stronger efforts at a global scale. First, on dialogue, we have to continue working to identify and share best practices on governance and other solutions that enable us to reduce societal vulnerability, to reconcile different water uses within water basins, and to sustainably manage surface and groundwater in order to preserve resources and ensure ecosystem stability. In transboundary basins, this requires cooperation across borders at a political and at a technical level. It was very well covered today, and we've heard some great examples and discussed some useful tools that can help achieve these aims. It was one of the objectives of the One Water Summit France organized with Kazakhstan in December last year, and we hope to further develop its results, for instance, on knowledge sharing and scientific cooperation, including by using spatial observation technologies and data. But we can't stop there. We must also agree to work together on solutions at regional and global level. This was very clear in the discussion today. We need to have clear commitments at the UN 2026 Water Conference to advance transboundary water cooperation and water resource preservation. We can do this through new agreements on transboundary basins. For example, France aims to pursue dialogue over our river basins in French Guiana. These are our two transboundary basins that are not yet covered by transboundary agreements and operative mechanism for integrated basin management. We also need to make good use of the main framework on this topic, the Water Convention. It is already global, with new parties from all around the world recently joining, and we see how the dialogue facilitated by this convention is an undeniable contributor to peace, stability, and regional integration. The 2026 conference is the moment for new ratifications to really scale up this convention and its impact. And finally, we need implementation. As we approach the deadline for the Agenda 2030 goals, it appears that we need to accelerate efforts on SDG 6, on water and sanitation. One of the key targets is SDG 6.5, on integrated water resource management. It is a compass for our action toward 2030, but also beyond. So to conclude, we all know that water is more scarce, more unpredictable, and more polluted. It is unevenly distributed, and yet indispensable to human and economic development. So we must reinforce our commitment to dialogue, to knowledge sharing, to commitments at regional and global levels, to multilateralism, and to the implementation of international conventions related to water. We can't wait. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. And that means we're wrapped up here for today. There's another water event happening here in the same room in about 45 minutes. So hopefully many of you will stay for that. Thank you again for joining us.
Kiss me through the phone. Can't you see I'm into you? Can't you see